Welcome to All Things Boosted. Today we're going to be measuring the crankshaft, the rods, and the pistons for this engine right here. Got my caliper here. Going to check calibration accuracy before we go ahead and start measuring all these journals out. Get all that out, write them all down. We'll compare them against factory specs. Go from there.
Alright, checking on the pistons. These are SuperTech 12.5 to 1, stock 87 bore, upgraded wrist pins, eagle rods, king bearings. And check the bore and check the diameter of the pistons for clearance. Write it all down, check specs.
Again, find the widest part to determine where the
you can kind of click it, and if you go past it, it gets loose again. If you come too far, it gets loose again.
Yep.
And if it's too short, it won't peak the largest point. You'll get stuck. So
3.4, 16, 17, 4174. Piston 1, 3.41. 51. We're on day 2 of engine assembly. Previously, we had measured all of our bearings. We've measured the crankshaft, the block bore, the rods, the rod bores. We've measured the pistons, the cylinder bores. We checked cylinder taper, cylinder outer roundness. We've shuffled bearing shells around to get the best rod bearing clearance so it's even across the board. Now we're going to start assembling.
what's the most important thing here?
Absolutely no dust or dirt inside or underneath the backside of the bearing shell.
Why?
They can deform the bearing when it's crushed. The bearing will physically take shape and create a high spot and contact the crankshaft. Any dust, dirt, anything can do serious damage in here. Oil too. Oil is
Especially-
pretty bad because oil will boil as it gets hot, and it'll cause a gas pocket and deform the bearing and do the same thing. You want to make sure the back sides of the bearing and all the bearing journals to be completely clean, oil-free, and dirt-free.
We've used soap, anti-everything.
What I'm doing right now is blowing dust and dirt off of the back of the bearing shell. Anything that could have accumulated, anything that looks like it could be an issue, is being cleaned off the bearing. Now we're getting ready to install the crankshaft. Put a little assembly lube on the bearings, keep everything all set, ready to go, and we'll drop the crankshaft in here.
Lube on the front, not on the back.
Right, you want the bearing shell to be dry on the back side.
What's the importance of that lube?
Keeps the crankshaft from contacting the bearings. It's super thick, sticky stuff. Its main purpose is to give the crankshaft a film to float on until the motor builds oil pressure initially. Without it, the motor won't last very long.
Dry start.
Let me blow this crankshaft off. Stay.
You're brave.
She's in there.
Some thrust washers.
Yep. Probably should have installed these prior to putting the crankshaft in, but sometimes they don't like to stay put.
That sticky stuff might have held them in place.
Would have, but you don't want them to get oil behind them in the same regards. All right. Pull the other one out real quick. Okay, the crankshaft's installed. Next step is we've got to get the bottom half of the block set up. A sandwich plate or whatever, the lower girdle of the engine. A lot of people call them lots of different things. It's a sandwich plate or bottom half. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those things.
You can put the rest of the bearings in there. Same story as the other side.
Yes, the bearings do have a lock tab. Try to keep them in place. Doesn't always happen, but that's what it's for. They kind of just snap in place. You just align it in and then kind of push it down. RTV on it. Let me clean the mating surfaces.
Can never clean too much.
You can't be over cleaned, that's for sure, especially in an engine assembly. Anything that can cause this motor to fail will happen. So as long as you just double and triple check that you've got everything, you'll be all right. Couple taps to seat the two halves together. We install bolts.
You got the pattern memorized? How to torque them down?
Yeah.
How many have you done of these?
Way too many. I've seen too many insides of these K-series. I've lost track.
A whole pallet of them up there.
There's a whole rack of them over there.
Over there.
And we have spare motors for our spare motors.
Race car life. Fix, break, repeat.
That's it. Yep, we've chased all the threads in the block. We've cleaned all the holes. Pre-measured all the bearing clearances. We know everything about this motor. Everything's logged, everything's kept track of. So later on, if something goes wrong, we have records of exactly what happened, what the motor was set up with, what parts, what things were torqued to, what the specs were before it first fired. We log everything. Right.
There's steps for these?
There is one step for these main ones, torque to 22 foot-pounds, and allow you to, with the degrees. It's day 3,784. We are now going to assemble the pistons on the rods and get them in the motor.
ugly.
There they are. There's one seated in place. Well, technically that one's number 4. Talk about a war bill. Seems good to me.